Hi, I'm John McAuliffe, Chief Marketing Officer of VFM Leonardo, and welcome to the VTV channel. VTV has been produced for hotel e-commerce, marketing, and sales professionals to provide insights, knowledge, and learnings from industry experts on how to extract more value from a hotel's presence on the internet. Each week, I interview an industry expert on a single topic. We encourage you to email us at vtv@vfmleonardo.com and suggest topics that you would like us to cover in future episodes. Today, I am joined by Dr. Chris Anderson, Assistant Professor at the Cornell School of Hotel Administration. Dr. Anderson's research focuses on revenue management and service pricing. He has worked with a variety of hotels, airlines, rental car and tour companies, as well as numerous consumer packaged goods and financial services firms in the application and development of revenue management. Dr. Anderson's research has been funded by numerous governmental agencies and industrial partners, and he serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Revenue and Pricing Management and is the regional editor for the International Journal of Revenue Management. Chris, welcome to VTV, and thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, John. My pleasure to be here.
Our episode today, and this ladders on some of the information that we've learned from you in the past on your study titled The Billboard Effect, is hoteliers in our audience, I'm sure, would be interested to understand how can they leverage OTAs and either the brand.com or their own hotel website for maximum conversion. And I guess specifically what I'd like to get a better understanding from you is getting in a little bit deeper into what you saw coming out of the study titled The Billboard Effect. And to remind everybody, that study studied the booking activity of travel shoppers on a brand's or a hotel's sales channels when that hotel had and didn't have a presence on OTAs, and there was a direct relationship or correlation, if you will, between bookings on brand.com and presence on the OTA. So putting it simply, your study showed that there was that direct correlation. In your opinion, what is it that an OTA and a brand.com differ from in the eyes of the travel shopper, and how can an individual hotel use each of these for their betterment or maximization of online marketing and revenue?
Okay, thanks, John. That's an evolving world. The OTA world versus the brand.com world. And as individuals, you've sort of had the opportunity to see this ebb and flow, right? So the OTA is really counter-cyclical to the economy, right? So we saw post 9/11 in that first sort of demand shock, the increasing breadth of the OTA and the travel experience, and they're basically that's where they sort of became that 10,000-pound gorilla, right? So they became really attractive, and then we saw this period of sort of 5 years where at the property level as well as at the air carriers and car rental firms, that suppliers tried to bring consumers back to supplier.com, right? And now we've recently seen that switch again with the demand decline back to the OTAs getting increasing traffic, right? And so that's, you could sort of argue, is it the chicken or the egg? But basically, as consumers become more value conscious, they start to shop more, and they look at the OTA as a vehicle to shop, right? To compare and make sure that they're getting a decent deal for their travel dollar, right? At the same time, because consumers are going to the OTAs, suppliers are providing them inventory at more favorable conditions. And so it is kind of this chicken and the egg thing that sort of snowballs and grows. And that's why we see the OTAs not just grow, but grow dramatically quarter over quarter in traffic, right? So it's a really, at the brand.com world, you just sort of see it happen all of a sudden, that it just sort of quickly snowballs. But you got to realize that that's attracting to that price-conscious consumer. And there's a study that came out of Continental Airlines in 2007 that really tells the story quite nicely, right? So basically, throughout the late 90s into 2006, basically Continental saw a pretty dramatic drop in their yield, which is measured in cents per mile traveled, right? In parallel with that, they saw a massive increase of consumers going online, and basically, roughly at the end of that period, half their transactions were occurring online. And so what, you could sort of look at a correlation and say that the act of pricing online and the use of OTAs has resulted in us receiving lower yield. And they went as far as to compare tickets, right? So when we look at Continental, which has, full rate parity. So if I'm shopping for a product, so an origin destination, whatever that might be from Houston to Newark on, December 10th, regardless of how I shop for that product, I'll see that same price for that same departure arrival. So they have full price parity. But when they actually looked at the tickets that were sold, say at the OTA versus a traditional travel agent or through their central reservation system, the OTA was yielding substantively lower prices than these other mechanisms, right? So again, it would sort of argue for rate dilution as a result of the use of these online travel agents. But then if you dig deeper, what you actually see is that the airline's load factor, or their, analogous to occupancy, was basically shifting to off-peak days. So the increase in the OTA and transaction volume and the increase in online transactions and the resulting decrease in yield was also occurring with basically more off-peak demand, right? So if you think of sort of Tuesdays as being an off-peak travel day, so before, all the shopping, loads might have been 70%. Now with all this shopping, the loads are moved up to 85%, right? And so what we see here is that the OTA has allowed consumers to shop and choose cheaper offerings, basically as they're flexible in their travel plans, right? So it provides a mechanism for consumers to see where the deals are, and if they're flexible, choose those deals. While at the same time, Continental is achieving high yields and higher load factors on their peak days, right? So the OTA here is, really attracting to the flexible, value-conscious consumer who chooses to travel or experience travel in off-peak, cheaper periods, right? So it's that whole idea that it's at that sort of price-conscious leisure traveler versus, brand.com may be a less value-driven individual who's more, brand loyal, and they choose value by moving throughout that chain family. So they go to Marriott.com, and then, versus staying at the Marriott, they might stay at the Courtyard as they make that value trade-off, but they're still relatively brand loyal.
Right. Do you think that we're going through a period of time where the volume of what we'll call value-conscious shoppers is going to continue to increase?
I think we're going to be in this period where consumers are looking for value, but again, we're just in this part of the cycle, right? So we will, move out of this low and into periods where consumers become a little bit more service focused and not necessarily all value focused, and move themselves away from always being shoppers to being more experience focused. Right. So right now, the consumer, a lot of consumers have a hard time justifying experience, and really are sort of penny pinching and looking for value. That doesn't mean as a hotelier we should be retracting on service or cutting back on labor, but it just means that that's not always going to be that main selling factor. But again, we still need to put those efforts out there because consumers will remember that experience.
Right. So Do you think that as we go through this cycle, that OTAs will start experiencing lower levels of traffic coming to their sites, or lower levels of bookings, or both?
I think that's inevitable, that we'll see the same sort of cycle we saw throughout, the last 5 years, whereas things pick up, suppliers pull back inventory. So there was some work out of Focusrite that sort of looks at this magic 60% sweet spot, where when occupancies are less than 60%, the OTA has a really sort of strong value proposition, and as volumes are increasing, as deals are there, and more inventory is there. But as inventory becomes, as occupancy becomes north of 60, 65 and onwards, then the suppliers are not providing the same level of inventory to the OTA. The value proposition of the OTA is not as strong, and basically the share of that shopping traffic moves away from the OTA back to the brand.com. And so I think that what we'll see is, as occupancy sort of gets back to the 60, 65 level, that we'll see a little bit reversal of this massive growth that we've seen at the OTA traffic.
Right. But presumably, I would guess that there's a role for OTAs in this travel planning process. As your study indicates, merely a presence on an OTA can help with lift on a supplier's site as well.
Right. And as the supplier, you should look to not just be listing inventory at the OTA, but also placing ads there where the consumer can click right through to brand.com. Right. So by placing those ads, you can actually increase the conversion at brand.com, as now you're front and center, so I can see the offerings and then I can click through to brand.com given those placements.
Right. Certainly it's in sync with what we hear from a lot of our guests on VTV, that an enhanced presence on OTAs helps lift bookings on more than just the OTAs, and has a positive impact on a hotel's own website as well as the brand.com website.
Very true.
Chris, thank you very much for joining us today on VTV channel. Your insights, I'm sure, are well appreciated by our audience, and we thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, John.
To all the viewers out there, be sure to post your comments on this episode of VTV and subscribe to our feed to receive more valuable insights from industry experts.